Yes, thank you all for being here. We're very, very honored to have Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rimon with us tonight. It's a very special occasion. Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rimon mentioned this to me, I think like before COVID even. This was an idea we had during a Sukkot trip from Shira, and he said, what do you do? And I said, well, I write poetry. What some of the things I do. And he's like, oh, my grandfather was a very famous poet. And I had no idea who's Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon, his grandfather, who he's named after. And it was a very special moment because it's not often you have a rabbi who appreciates poetry. And so I read up on Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon's grandfather, and he really was one of the foremost modern poets in Israel at the inception of Israel, before he was an Oleh, before the state was even established. He was a neighbor of Rav Kook in Jaffa. And what's really special about that connection between the religious and the creative is that it was something Rav Kook appreciated and nurtured in Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon, and I think they nurtured each other in that sense. They inspired each other. And I think it's a wonderful thing because the Tanakh and our Torah source says that it is poetry. We have Shir HaShirim, it's all poetry. So Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon is another link in the chain of religious poetry, and we're very privileged tonight that we get to have his grandson come and present it to us. And there's something about a grandson, something about a child of someone else coming and presenting their story. So we're very privileged. And just to give a bit of background about Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rimon, in case people don't know him, he's a wonderfully great person, and I feel that comes before achievements, but his achievements are great. They're just like so many. I'm not going to read them all, but he's an internationally acclaimed posek. That's one of the occasions we met him. Actually, David and I was in South Africa when he came to do a Pesach in South Africa. So he writes many halachic books, and some of them are at the back here if anyone wants to look at them on big topics such as Shemitah. And he takes halacha into our modern reality. He brings it into what is relevant today for us. He is also the founder and chairman of Sulamot, which makes Jewish education accessible. It's the Ratzah L'Mishnah that we know, those wonderful videos for children. And he's also the founder and chairman of La'ofek, which used to be Job Katif, which was the response to the Gush Katif situation where people suddenly didn't have jobs, and he stepped up and he actually received a President's Award for his volunteerism in that, and he's received many awards. But as I said, it's like one thing to have many achievements, but it's another thing to be just a mensch and a wonderful person who appreciates poetry. And this poetry, I spent the afternoon rereading Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon's, his grandfather's poetry in this book, which is also at the back if anyone's interested. It's for sale from the publisher, 65 shekels. And it's wonderfully translated. You've got the Hebrew and English together, which I think is really, really helpful. And as one of the people here already said tonight, as she looked at the book, she said, wow, this reads like prayer. And that's the thing, that's what poetry often is. It's a song, it's a prayer. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Rav Rimon to share with us.
So toda, Sarah and David. I'm very happy and excited to give this, don't have to call it a lecture, because I give lots of lectures. But most of them, let's say 99%, will be in Torah, in Halacha. I brought some of my English books here. People know me sometimes from the Shemitah, from the Agada, also the Shabbos book now published in English. And to speak on my grandfather, it's very exciting for me. I never saw him. I'm named after him. But my grandfather was a visitor on our Shabbos table every Shabbos. We had no Shabbos that we didn't read one of his poems every Shabbos. And I know lots of them by heart. They helped me also when I served in the army, also in difficult times. I thought on a poem of my grandfather, and it gave me chizuk. My grandfather was, on one hand, very close to Rav Kook, and Rav Kook thought on his songs that are on his poetry that it's the highest level in the last few hundred years, and he wrote it. But on the other hand, all the poets that were non-religious at all admired him and took his songs, his poetry, such as Brenner and Bialik and Shai Agnon and Chernichovsky and all of them. It was very unique because then the majority of the poets, most of them weren't religious. I mean, it was very unique. Someone told my father, he told him, the poetry of your father, my grandfather, is so good that although he was religious, we forgive him. It was years ago, but then today, it's more natural to be, but it was very difficult then. And my grandfather was very tzanua, very modest, there's a street on his name in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, and in Bnei Brak. In Jerusalem, it's a very fancy street, in Ramat Bet HaKerem. It's not for him. I mean, he was very modest. And I would like to speak, first of all, to give a background on my grandfather, and then to speak on his poetry. So maybe this booklet I created for tonight. Maybe we'll open on page number 3. This page, you can see this page, pictures, okay, the big picture there. Now go below, you see a small picture here with one rabbi, Harav Ephraim Eliezer Granat, you see, here on the left side. Mana Aguda Ephraim Eliezer Granat Neve Chesed Yafo. This is my great-grandfather. He came to Israel, made Aliyah from Poland, 1908. My grandfather came a year afterwards, 1909. Just to share a story, to understand. I mean, my grandfather grew up in Poland, Bijon, Lach, Plock, but he grew there and he learned in the yeshiva of Rav Reines in Lida. But he came when he was around 20. He came to Israel, and his father and siblings were living in Jaffa next to Rav Kook. And from there he got close to Rav Kook. But just to understand the situation then, the Turkish are in charge here in Israel that time. situation is terrible. Nothing to eat. I'll share one story of my great-grandfather here, Ephraim Eliezer Granat. He was ill, and they didn't have money to buy food. I mean, nothing. So his children, my grandfather and siblings, they went around to find something, and they saw a Turkish soldier. And they asked him, do you have food? Our father is sick. So he said, tell me, where does he live? They went. And he saw him, and he gave him food. A few days afterwards, he came again, gave him food. A week afterwards again, and they saw that he was so impressed of this rabbi. Few months, it continued. After a few months, he comes there, he gives him food, he goes out. And he goes around there in the field, and suddenly they hear shooting. They go out, and they see that other Turkish soldiers shot this soldier and killed him. They went to try and save him. And then they took his shirt, to try to see the blood. And they discovered a tzitzis. Wow. They understood he was a Jewish soldier in the Turkish army. And from then they kept his yortzeit. Every year they were saying Kaddish in the yortzeit of this. So just to give a little background on the situation here in Eretz Israel. The name of my great-grandfather was Granat, Ephraim Eliezer Granat. My grandfather, with his friend Shai Agnon, you can see them together here, in the right side, in the same page, you can see Shai Agnon and my grandfather, and the baby is my older sister, Nomi. Shai Agnon had all the time, like not jokes, but he said, that's what I said to the photographer, I don't have a photograph with women, but with this lady I'm ready. So it's okay. And Shai Agnon and my grandfather together translated granat, like pomegranate, to Rimon. And from then we are Rimon, and also my great-grandfather changed to Rimon, everyone changed to Rimon, and this is the name. And for me, it's a great zchut to be named after my grandfather. So this is background, just to understand the beginning. And as I said, he comes to Israel in his 20s, married, you can go to the first page, married to his wife, Esther, my grandmother, Esther Rimon. They met together in Vilna. He went there, it doesn't matter. They came married. He passed away when he was 69. She passed away when she was 80 years old. She was in the house of my family. I wasn't born yet. In Tel Aviv, 80 years old. She took my brother to a Purim party. It was Ta'anit Esther. She came back and my mother asked her, how was it? She said, it was wonderful. She sat on a couch and died. This was the end of it. So she had a mitat neshika, this is my grandmother Esther, and my oldest daughter is Esther. But I had a good thing because my grandmother from one side is Esther. From the other side of my mother, that was British, and everything I speak in English here is thanks to my mother, Alea Shalom. Her mother was Tzipora. My father Esther, my mother Tzipora. My wife has had two grandmothers, one Esther and the other one Tzipora. So we have Esther and both sides. We haven't got Tzipora because Sharon's grandmother didn't like the Shem Tzipora. She told her, I'm asking you don't name after me. I don't like the name. Okay? You need a lot of wow, anava. No, it's not so simple to say something like this. My grandfather, 1922, when he's around 30, I mean it's after he published lots of poetry. From the time he was 17 years old he started, but 32, 34. No, yes, 33, maybe 33. He went around. My father was born already, and his sister. He went around in Tel Aviv, next to the Arcon, and suddenly 3 Arabs jumped at him and tried to kill him. And he was wounded terribly. Just to understand how terribly he was wounded, go to page number 2. You can see the newspaper here on top. Yosef Tzvi Rimon, 1922. Neherag leda'avon. He was killed. You see? על ידי, you see what here? לפני איזה זמן, על ידי ערבים באופן מכוער ופראי מאוד. He was killed by Arabs in a terrible way. בגיליון הבא, next, yes, יבואר אם ירצה השם כל אותה המאורה בפרוטרוט. We'll tell you the story, how he was killed. The next one you can see here, ברוך מחיי המתים. They discovered that he wasn't killed. They didn't have WhatsApp, but they said he was really wounded. It was terrible. And because of this he went to Tzfat, because it was a hospital in Tzfat and the air of the mountains, and he stayed there for a few years. And the same time my grandmother and the children stayed in Tel Aviv. She had a small store there and she continued working. They sent him money. So he had a quite challenging life, not so simple. As I said before, he was very close to Rav Kook. You can see here, this is a letter that Rav Kook writes, and he writes on my grandfather. You have the same letter in English. If we go, yes, a few pages. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. The first page of the booklet before the poetry. You can see the letter in English. I'm reading in Hebrew, but you can see the English. מלא חצי יובל לכבוד עבודתו הפוריה של ידידנו המשורר המלא רוח דת ויראת השם מורנו הרב יוסף צבי רימון שליטה. יישר כוח. הגיע הזמן להתעורר, ליתן כבוד ועוז למשורר המיוחד במינו בזמננו. We need to wake up to give כבוד to the special poet in our generation. שכל הגות רוחו ומעוף שירתו, you can hear it's Rav Kook, שכל הגות רוחו ומעוף שירתו נובעים הם ממעיין החיים של אור ישראל, ניצחו ועוזו וקדושת נשמתו. This is a sentence, without telling you it's Rav Kook, everyone that knows Rav Kook would understand it's Rav Kook. But he says all his poetry comes from מעיין החיים של אור ישראל, it comes from the מעיין החיים, the life, river, נהר,
Well,
okay, של עם ישראל, and from קדושת נשמתו, and he speaks afterwards that יבואו ימים והוא לא יהיה רק אחד המשוררים בישראל, יהיה למופת, למשל למשוררי יהודה הבאים. He's going to be the first one for the next all the poets that will come after him, and he writes there that in the end שירה המרומים של שירת ישראל אשר תתחדש הוד קדושתי. He said this is the new poetry of עם ישראל. You know, actually Rav Kook starts the ציונות הדתית here, And he has a small group around him. One of this group is my grandfather, and as a poet, he's the first Zioni Dati poet. All the poets that will come afterwards will see my grandfather as a model. If it will be Zelda, if it will be others, I mean, all of them saw him as a model because he was the first one. And as I said, he was on one hand with Rav Kook and close to Rav Kook, but on the other hand he was very close to all other people here weren't born in Israel, so that doesn't tell them so much. But when my father says that as a child he remembers Brenner holding him on his hands. And you hear Brenner, not for everyone it says something, but Brenner is, you know, it's let's say left religion. It's another side, and to understand that he's coming, Chernichovsky. It wasn't say nothing here. A few years ago, my daughter is learning literature in the Hebrew University, and she told me that her professor Hirschfeld is very famous. She said, you know him?
Yeah.
Uriel Hirschfeld. He said he gave one lecture on my grandfather. She didn't tell him that she's that it's her great grandfather, and she told me. And then for years I want to publish again the poetry. He has a few books in Hebrew, but they were 30 years ago, 40, and it need to be. And I decided to call him to see maybe he wants to be to help. I called him and I told him, כאן מדבר יוסף צבי רימון. He almost fainted. He told me, he was shocked. He was shocked that I explained. And he came straight away. In one day he came to Machon Lev. He said to me again and again. And he said, look, the poetry of your grandfather, we must publish it. We must, not to publish it, you have to work on it and things, but to understand that this is something that it's very special, that it's a high standard, that it's something that, of course, religious full people appreciate, but also not religious at all. One of the professors that wrote a whole book on my grandfather was Professor Tzvi Luz. Tzvi Luz passed away a few months ago. His father was very famous, was Yosef Rosh HaKnesset, I think the first one, Kaddish Luz. This street Kaddish Luz. And told me, Professor Tzvi Luz, he said, when I was a child, I saw your grandfather in Dgania. I was a member in Kibbutz Dgania. And my father called me quick and told me, תסתכל על המשורר הזה. Look at him. זה משורר גדול. Look at him. This is a great poet. And he says, from then, דווקא נפשי ברימון. I was close, I was touched. And all the years I was teaching him. And this is another הקדמה for the poetry. And just you can go to the next page. You can see here this picture is a picture of Hanasi, the president, Yitzhak Ben Tzvi. Yitzhak Ben Tzvi, you have another book there. It's okay, you have lots of them.
There's more here.
You have lots of them. Hanasi Yitzhak Ben Tzvi gave the President Award of Literature to my grandfather. So you can see here Yitzhak Ben Tzvi. My grandfather standing is my father. And if once I'll give here another evening on my father, then it's a special story. On someone that served in the Haganah, was a partner of declaring of the State of Israel, and afterwards had a heart attack when he was 54 years old, and the doctors thought he's going to die in 3 months. And against everyone then, he started sports, because they told everyone, if you have heart attack then, don't do nothing, stay in your bed. And he started running 10 kilometers for 30 years in Tel Aviv. He was in competitions in other places. But this is a story for another night on Briut on health, on running, on exercising.
Wow.
And then you can see my mother. My mother, as I said, was a British lady. My mother, also on her I can give an evening, but not now. I got so much from them. And you can see Nomi, my oldest sister, and Rachel Yanait, the wife president. Around Tafshin Samechet, around 12 years ago, more 14 years ago. No. Tafshin Samechet, כמה זה? 14. I received the President Award from Shimon Peres on Gush Katif, on Job Katif. For me, to get the President Award, it wasn't that I was so excited, but I was excited to continue my grandfather. I remember that he got it, I get it then, and it was, and when I got it, I didn't want just to go to Shimon Peres and to get, so I said, what do? I need to do something productive. I gave him one of my books, and no, everyone gets, you don't give, I give. He opened it, and was written, Shimon Peres, Al tishkach et Yonatan Pollard.
Wow.
Don't forget Yonatan Pollard, think on him, so maybe it helped a little something. Okay. I want to go now to the first page of the poetry. Page number 12, it's written. All the poets, almost all of them, also Jewish and also non-Jewish, in this generation were writing with rhymes. Today, you know, everyone writes without rhymes, but then everyone wrote with rhymes. My grandfather felt that when you write with rhymes, you can't be free. You can't say everything you want really to say, to express. And he wrote a song, a poet, against rhymes. And from then, all his poems are with no rhymes. And afterwards, later on, when everyone wrote about him, this is his motto, המוטו הרימוני. This is the poet that you can see here. השיר ניתן בכלא. Now, I think that I can read it in Hebrew and you can just follow up the English, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want, one of you can read the English.
Dave, you want to read the English?
Yeah.
Now, I have to tell you just the translation here, he did it, he wanted it to do it simple, that people can understand. But just to understand that the Hebrew of my grandfather is a very high level, very high level. My daughter, that I told you that she's doing now doctorate in literature, and I hope she'll do it on my grandfather, she said that she's Israeli, that it's easier for her to read the English than the Hebrew. Not exactly, but she said that the Hebrew is very high. So, you don't know if to translate simple, but he decided to translate simple, so we left it like this. It's interesting.
I'll do the English after from the videos if people don't have it.
Okay, so I'm reading the Hebrew and you'll do the English afterwards. Or we'll do the opposite.
No, whatever, no.
You will do the opposite, that you can understand the Hebrew first? Okay. השיר ניתן בכלא. Just the beginning, yes, the poem was put in prison. סגרו עליו בחרוזים. They closed it not with bars, but with rhymes. In Hebrew, it's even better because in Hebrew you say bars, you say soragim. Soragim. Instead of soragim, in jail, סגרו על השיר, they closed it בחרוזים. Understand? He took the word soragim and he switched it to חרוזים. כבוא האביב ביקש דרור ואחלץ אותו ממיצר. אופי בת השיר, חוגי בשמיים, אשא עבר אחרייך, אדלה מתהום יופייך, ולא יראה נזר בעלותי אלייך, ובשובי אל תבל אדמה. Everyone that understands Hebrew can understand the beauty of just the words here. But let's read it in English.
The poem was imprisoned and closed in rhyme. When the spring came, it sought freedom, so I released it from its bonds. Fly, daughter of song, circle in the heavens. I will follow you. I will draw from your profound beauty, and no stranger will see me when I go up to you and upon my return to earth.
Now to understand what he writes here, no stranger will see me. My grandfather didn't save his poetry. He wrote and he left it, and sometimes came Chernichovsky, Asher Barat, and they took poems and they published them. My father told him, why don't you save them? And he said, I'm singing like a bird in the forest. When she sings, she doesn't look, oh, he's watching me, I want to be free. And he wrote, and my father collected all the songs, all the poetry, and thanks to my father we have all those poems today. Of course, some of them lots of them are published in newspapers, lots of them, but also, so this is to be really free. And I can feel in the poetry of my grandfather that he was really free. On one hand, he can write things, he writes also on Eretz Israel, also on Hashem, and also on love. All his poetry on love. So Tzvi and poets that are not religious, they'll explain it in one way. There is someone that wrote a book on him, a doctorate, a few years ago. He called the book Acharon Meshorerei HaElokim. Dror Eidar is his name. Acharon Meshorerei HaElokim. He is the last one of the Meshorerei HaElokim. And he told me that all those poems that speak on love, he took to Yeshivat HaMekubalim, Bet El, Yeshivat of Kabbalah. Or did I say Kabbalah in English? Kabbalah. And they told him, what do you mean? It's full with Kabbalah. It's like Shir HaShirim. It's full. My grandfather also, sometimes he can write things that, he had challenging life. He can have in his songs also questions. Not everything is so simple. He has questions, he has things that he asks Hashem. But also, when he has questions, and also if he's upset, maybe even angry, all the time he's connected. And this is very special, to be connected to Hashem and to be able to express, to say everything. So he was very free in his poetry. I would like now to share next page. Bati El Sharon. This poem I told my wife when we married, because the name is Sharon. באתי אל השרון ובפרחים התנחמתי. But I won't read it now, I read the last paragraph. אהבתי סלעי ארצי. And afterwards do it in English. I want just to... Okay, I'll just say, my grandfather went a lot walking in Israel. He didn't have a car. He was going, as I said, Gania and other places, walking, taking a gala, with a horse that took him another place, and he went. And he goes around, he sees the rocks, the stones, and he feels, wow, 2,000 years, not 2,000, 4,000 years, we had Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Yoshua, and the Maccabim. And he feels all the time that he continues the big dream of our nation all those years. And then he writes this poem, אהבתי סלעי ארצי על הרריה. כל אבן אומרה שיר. אני עולה מאחת אל אחת, וקרבי תתעורר רינה. אלה, the stones, חיו כמותי, חלמו הרבה, התגעגעו, חלומם רחק ניבו, והיו לאבנים. I would like to read it in English and then I'll say something with it.
Third paragraph. I love the rocks of my land on its mountains. Each stone sings a song. I go up from one to another, and inside I stir with glad song. They lived like me. They dreamed much. They yearned. Their dream was long in coming, and they became stones.
You know, people are afraid to dream. They're afraid to dream because they say we dream, and who knows if we'll be able to make the dream real, to create, to bring it to reality. My grandfather is walking here in Eretz Israel. He looks at the stones and he says to himself, wow, so many dreams were here of all our nation. Those dreams did not went away, weren't for nothing. The stones saw, heard those dreams. Maybe the dreams sometimes didn't become real, but turned to be stones, rocks. But they still keep singing. We can listen. We can listen to the dream, we can join the dream, and we can make real dreams that maybe our parents, grandparents had before. I live in Gush Etzion, and once I thought to myself, you know, Dalet B'Iyar, Tashach, 1948, Kfar Etzion, all the wives and the children were escaped to Jerusalem because it was so dangerous. And in Kfar Etzion stayed just the husband, the fathers. The Jordans came there, and Kfar Etzion had no weapon anymore. And the Jordans told them, if you survive, we won't touch you. So they agreed, and they told them, we want to photo you. So they stood for a photo, and then they shot and killed all of them. This is the story of Kfar Etzion. You can see today in the Chizayon Or Koli. It's also in English in Kfar Etzion. How you say Chizayon Or Koli?
Sound the night show.
Okay. I thought to myself, what those people, fathers, husbands, what did they think in the last minute of their life? They thought to themselves, all our dream was for nothing. In the walkie-talkie they said, Malka Nafla. Malka was the name of everything. For years we tried to create Gush Etzion here. We didn't succeed. If they would be able to open their eyes for 30 seconds and to see Gush Etzion today, to see thousands of people, to see Yeshivot and Batei Knesset and Upe, they would understand that this is thanks to their dream. The Siyata Dishmaya, of course. And understand you have a dream, not always you'll be able to reach everything, to make everything to reality by yourself. But no dream goes away. You had a dream, something will happen. And this gave me lots of koach and power to dream all the time. To dream, and some things that I did, like Job Katif and other things to help the former residents from Gush Katif. And, you know, it seems crazy. Sometimes, how will you succeed? It's not that I knew exactly how I'm going to succeed, but I know you need to dream. You need to dream, and Baruch Hashem, thanks to the dreams, so came Job Katif, and then helping Ethiopians and soldiers, and Ratzim LaMishnah and other things. And just now I spoke with people in another project of Shiduchim that I'm working on. Now, you need to dream all the time. You have koach, you have power, don't be afraid to dream, and maybe you'll succeed, and of course you won't succeed. Your dream will be somewhere. It will stay in the stones, and the song will be someone that is listening well can hear the song of your dream also years after. Okay, let's go to the next page. The first poem that I wrote spoke about the system of rhymes. The second one about Eretz Israel and about dreams. And here is about God, Hashem. lots of people, especially today, when they try to reach Hashem, God, they go to India, they need to go to special places to be close to Hashem. My grandfather says, Agoz Nizri. What is Nezer? Nezer is also a long hair. Nezirut. Nazir. Nazir. Nezer is also a crown. There are people that they need to be like a Nazir. To go somewhere, like to have a long hair and to go extreme somewhere to find Hashem. He says, I'm going to cut my hair, to cut the crown. Agoz Nizri, Pe'er Roshi. Maybe now it's the glory of my head, but I'm going to cut it. Ve'omar le'elokai, I'm going to say to God, Lo avod be'arim, Lo ele al siehem bakesh hedcha shama. I will not come on the mountains. I won't try to find the high places to find you. I don't need to go to India to find you. מערות סתרים לא אחקור בקש את פעמיך. I don't need to go to caves to try to find you. כי שפכת הוד גם על שדות קרובים. על כל עץ פורח אין הוד בלי יודיך. You are everywhere. I can find you everywhere. אין הוד בלי יודיך. הנה means you read it in English. אדמה אשכון בהרים אגור בצייה ואתה חמדת כל שביל ועל כל שביל אתה. You are everywhere. You are here. I don't need to go far away to find you because I have to search here and then I'll see that you are everywhere.
I will cut off my crown, the glory of my head, and say to my God, I will come no more to the mountains. I will not scale their peaks or seek your echoes there. I will not explore secret caves, seeking your steps. For you have also poured splendor on nearby fields, on every blossoming tree. There is no splendor without your splendor. Until when will I dwell in the mountains, live in the wilderness? For you coveted every path, and you are on every path.
I think that this poem, I suppose it was important also then, but I think in our generation it's very special. תודה רבה. And I want to go to the next page.
אפשר לשאול שאלה קצרה על השם?
כן.
What was the context that he was speaking about? They weren't going off to India. In those days, where were they running off to in their search of Hashem when he was writing?
I think he spoke on himself because he went to Tzfat. He went and he closed himself after he was wounded for 3 years learning Kabbalah and learning things in Tzfat. I think that he wrote it after he turned himself. I suppose so, but I don't know. Maybe after my daughter will make doctorate on him. It looks like I know better all the things, but I think that it was on him. There are lots of things that we discovered, lots of handwriting, lots of things that weren't published, lots of things that we are going over now. I mean, to work on it, it's to work 3 years, and I think also it can be one book that will be more for universities, another one that can be an album book, but I think especially for schools. All the poems of my grandfather, according to the Ministry of Education, they are official. I mean, you can teach them. But for teachers, they need that you give them a few pages to explain, that you give things for the students, that you make maybe a movie. You need to do lots of things. So I hope that once it will be, but we discover all the time things. The thing that I discovered now, my daughter just now is going over things. So one thing that I discovered, my father wrote poems that he wrote also on Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, and Tanakh. Today it's not, his poems are important also today. I think what he wrote on Tanakh today, it's another generation for Tanakh. What we saw that he writes, Rav Kook told me, he says, that I'm going to write halacha brura, I'm going to write halacha on all Shulchan Aruch in the special system of our generation. And I ask you to do the same on Tanakh. So he felt he had a mission, so he wrote. And it came out that lots of things we discover. It's very interesting to discover. And also those things, I have dozens of letters, dozens that my grandfather wrote from Tzfat to his family in Tel Aviv. And lots of them, when you look correct on the date of them, on the poetry, you can do lots of things. Maybe I'll just, you can see in the first page, example that I gave here of one of the letters. You see in the first page? I have lots of them. Today it's a shame that you won't have letters anymore, WhatsApp, לכבוד, you see, I'm reading in Hebrew, לכבוד בני אהובי מחמל נפשי האהוב בעיני השם והאנשים, כמר דוד רימון. He writes him a letter, and I'm reading now the end of the letter from the bottom, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the second word, it's Hebrew, but just to see how when he writes for the family, he thinks on them, but he thinks on redemption, on גאולה. It's a והעיקר, the main thing is שאראה תמיד את בניי היקרים, that I'll see my children במצב העושר, happiness, לעת יאיר השם לעמו מאפלתו. You want to translate? לעת יאיר השם לעמו מאפלתו.
God will illuminate his people from its darkness.
ואתם תתנוססו במולדתכם מולדת צבי, מולדת ישראל. זה קצת קשה now. You will. לשם ולתהילה ולתפארת, ותראינה לנו כל ברכות הקץ, כברכת אביך אוהבך, בלי מצרים ואהבה, יוסף צבי רימון. Just to hear, you feel, it's my name. Why did he?
That's his grandfather.
Isn't it a bit confusing?
It's confusing. I have to tell you that few times happened that people came to me when they searched for my grandfather, and then they find me by mistake. And one of them was is a Sephardi singer. Not everyone knows him. His name is Shlomo Bar. הברירה הטבעית. He saw a poet very famous, ילדים זה שמחה. A few years ago, he discovered the poetry of my grandfather. He read it, and he was so excited. Said, "I feel I'm reading Tanakh. I'm reading Tfilah." He was so excited. He called me and he asked for more poems, and he started להלחין, to compose music, and he composed a whole disc on the poems of my grandfather. And he told me, your grandfather brought me back to Torah. I mean, he was on the way. He said, I'm touched to your grandfather. It's wow. It's and to hear him, he gives all the time lectures at him now. He speaks in the radio everywhere, so I get all the time Galei Tzahal, the newspaper. But it's interesting that he got touched, and then he got to me by this the same name. I'm almost on the end here. There are lots of things to speak, but
Was he a rabbi?
he was a rabbi, but he taught in the beginning of his life. He taught in בית ספר תחכמון in Petach Tikva, but after he was wounded, so he left it. And in the end, he continued, came back more to those things. My grandfather, as I said before, had no money. He was in Tzvat. He had terrible conditions, terrible. When my father was 13 years old, was bar mitzvah, what can he give him a present? He has no money. So what did he give him? He gave him a poem. My father saw the poem and he said, I don't like it. It has no rhymes. It's not a poem. So my grandfather wrote another poem with rhymes for him. After years, when Chernichovsky, Yasher Barash, when they published the books of my grandfather, so they saw the poems and they looked at the poem with the rhymes and said, it's nice, but we won't put it in the book. The other one, they put in the book. You can see here, in the next page, 94 it's written. You see 94? You can see in the bottom, בני רגש, פרח עדין, שותה טל כשושן, מגביעי שחקים. ברית לו את הילד אלוקים, יחמדה לנצחים על גבולי מולדת. He speaks on his son, also on his connection with Hashem, and also he is in Israel, על גבולי מולדת. אראלים is מלאכים. הושיטו לו זרים, כי פרה בגן תלמודו. שפרו על שפתותיו אמרי נעים זמירות. Who was נעים זמירות of עם ישראל? דוד המלך. My father, his name was דוד. יח כינו רהב ידובב עמוסלה. You want to read it in English?
My sensitive son, gentle flower, drinking dew like a lily from the cups of heaven. He has a covenant with the doe of God. He will desire her forever on the borders of the lands. Angels handed him garlands, for he flowered in the garden of his learning. Enchantment on his lips, fine words of pleasant songs, smiting the violin of pride. He will hearten his people to speak Selah.
I knew this poem. I knew it by heart. Around 15 years ago, after my father passed away, my mother, Alea Shalom, told me, can you come and do Seder? Arrange the house. Okay? I took lots of things. My father had lots of things, I told you, in the Agana and other things. And also my grandfather had, wow. And I'm looking, suddenly, I see an old paper. And I understand, I have the original of this song, of the present that my father got for his bar mitzvah. You can see the next page. מוקדש לדוד בני לחג הבר מצווה שלו, בני רגש, and you see in the end, מאת אביך אוהבך לנצחים, יוסף צבי רימון צפת. I hold it and I was shaking. I couldn't believe. I have the original of the present, the bar mitzvah present. I was with tears, I sat, I looked at it again and again. Then I went back to Alon Shvut. I'm learning with Edvir bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah in my community once. And I had a bar mitzvah boy the same day. I spoke to him and then I asked him, do you know which present you are going to get for your bar mitzvah? He said, I don't know, maybe it will be an iPhone or iPod, I don't say, maybe this. I told him, I want to tell you something. If you get an iPhone, how many years will it keep? He said, 3 years, 4 years. What do you mean? No. My grandfather, no money. No money. He gave my father a present that kept so many years that I can enjoy today. And I showed him the poem. And I told him, you can ask whatever you want. And I put an iPhone. But ask from your parents, Tanakh, and ask them to write in the beginning, Akdasha, to write dedication. This will keep for you. This you'll have, you can show your children, your grandchildren. A few years ago, I have it. I have this. And I have lots of books of my grandfather and my father's with a dedication. And every time I publish a book, I write dedication for my children. I give it to them. And when my wife wrote now 2 books on Parashat Shavua in English, it's here. So also she wrote dedication. I told you before, first of all, I have to say, it's very impressive that you are staying here all the lecture and listening. כל הכבוד, באמת. כל הכבוד. You know, children today have no patience like you have. It's כל הכבוד. To be a part. A few years ago, Professor Tzvi, I told you about him, he wrote a book on my grandfather. He came to me and said, you know, all the poets were temporary, because everyone writes according to the system of his generation. Your grandfather is timeless, because he wrote according to the neshama, to the soul. And it's very interesting, because I see today so many people that are interested. Teenagers, men, women, it's interesting, religious, non-religious, people here. And I feel that it's very special, because to bring religious poetry, but that will be in a high level, and it will be something that, it's not that you haven't got, but it's very special. It's very special that that I hope once to be able also to publish a book and an album and things for high school. You know, in another hat, I'm writing most materials today, not me, but my staff. Shira is one of them for in Sulamot, for the Ministry of Education, in Halacha, in Mishnah, in other things. I hope once I have the ability to do it, and maybe also to take few singers, not just Shlomo Bar, because he's one kind. Like, I don't know them so well, but Eviatar Banai and Ishai Rivo and others, that they will not to do all those things. It's not so simple. I mean, of course, I hope I'll succeed, and I hope I have partners for this thing. But I feel that this is a real mission, because I think it's so important to those. I think this poetry can bring a new spirit, new and old, together to people today, and especially to youth. I have lots more to speak on my grandfather, but I think that for this evening it's enough. So toda raba. This you can keep. This is for you. I created it for this night.
If we want more, where can we get
We've got books.
I have more I created here.
We've also got books at the back that are for sale. If anyone has any questions, can anyone ask questions?
Yes. If you have questions, so yes, Bakasha.
So you said at the time most people would write Rimon, but he was exceptional. Who influenced him? Where did he come up with this notion to start writing this way?
It's interesting. We don't know. We don't know. We know that he was influenced by Rav Kook, and we know that Rav Kook also wrote things not exactly in this language, again rhymes, but also that to be more chofshi in singings. There are lots of things. Was once a sofer, his name was Rabbi Yamin. He was very famous then, and he wrote that lots of the poetry of my grandfather, you can see that there are like explanations of things of Rav Kook, but I'm not sure that it's the answer here, because maybe this poem was written before. I'm not sure exactly when was it written. Bialik, that he was very, let's say, the teacher of all of them in Israel. Then he was the old. Most of his things are with rhymes. He has some with no rhymes, don't know if it's connected to this. I don't know, because the majority, of course, was with rhymes. So I think that Rav Kook helped him maybe to enlarge it, but I think it came from him. I don't know if he had something else. זה מה שרציתי לשאול?
כן, כי I'm so inspired by it. He was 20 years old when he came, and it's not just that he spoke Hebrew, it was like it flowed from his mouth in such a beautiful way.
Yes, it is interesting. He writes.
I have a question.
What's your question?
I thought Rav Kook lived in Jerusalem, not today.
It's a good question. In a minute I'll answer. I'll answer now. Rav Kook lived in Tzfat, and afterwards he went to Jerusalem. Not in Yaffa. Yaffa. In Yaffa, and afterwards in Jerusalem. When he was 14 years old, 13 years old, he writes in himself that, first of all, his father was Zionist, but his father was very afraid because he saw his son that likes new poetry, likes Hebrew, and his father wrote him letters that came out in 2 books afterwards as Emunah books, that he writes him, look, you have to be careful. You are getting too close to people that you know. And he answers letters, and he has a letter, you say that you have sfekot be'emunah. You have safek, and he gives him shvus to understand. It's very interesting, but when he was a child already, he says, I'm going to the grocery, the Jewish one, and I'm checking all the time, maybe they wrapped the field with a newspaper that I can see the poem of, of someone, of Bialik, of this. He searched for all this from the time he was young. So I think that although he wasn't Poland yet, but I think from his father he got the beginning. Then reading all this material. Then maybe he learned in the yeshiva of Rav Reines in Nida, maybe there also, but from the time he comes to Israel, he speaks just Hebrew. And with his children, just Hebrew. And he writes all the time, I'm just in Hebrew, everything is in Hebrew, so I suppose that it came better all the time, but also for me it's surprising to see how he had such a high level. I mean, it's a higher level. It's much higher than 99% of Israelis today here. Yes, it's not. But I think it touched him I know that from the time he was 13, 14 already he was reading Hebrew, so in Poland.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else now? Thank you very, very much. It was a real honor. And I think we all learned so much tonight. I know as a poet I've learned to believe in dreams. And not only that, but the idea of a stone, a dream that becomes a stone, but we also believe that with Moshe, when he came to the stone that was meant to bring water, he hit the stone instead of speaking to it. And a poet speaks to a stone because they are able to dream and believe in water. So your grandfather, with his words, he spoke and he's created dreams in you as his grandson, and dreams in all of us who will continue to read his poetry, and may your dreams also come into fruition. And that's the way we create the world, through words, and poets know this. And so thank you for your words tonight and sharing your grandfather's story and his poetry.
It's thanks to you. You encouraged me to come. And also I have to tell you another thing. For me, the blessing for you, that your grandchildren and your children will admire their grandparents like I admire my grandfather. Wow, this is my life. And I think it's so important. Be continuous to understand, this is your light in life. טוב, תודה רבה. בהצלחה.
That was really wonderful. I'm going to send this to you.
תודה רבה.
Really, I am. I even know how you speak about the stone, we have to cut it, and you said it was a trailer. Because it's very, very special. Yeah. As you're saying it, I'm like, this is the heart. This is the heart. Very beautiful. I love that so much. No, it was very special. Thank you. He was meant to be here this year, and I think he would enjoy it. What, darling?
You know what I want?
You enjoyed it, right?
I want a picture with him, because he listens for all the...
Let's take a photo.
Can I have a picture with you?
Let's take a photo, gorgeous.
Yes, I need a picture with you.
This is very special, do you know?